Alright, in this video I'm just going to go over creating a particular chess piece, the Rook, and just some of the different strategies I use to create it, and hopefully it'll help you with some of the pieces that you're working on as well. So I'm going to take you through the whole process on how I created this piece here with the embossment as well. So I'm going to start a new part. So I'm going to click on the icon top left there. I'm going to make sure I'm in the part section here, and I'm going to go standard millimeter part. So that's going to bring us into a new canvas. And I'm going to start my sketch. So I'm going to click up here in the top left, and then I'm going to start my sketch on the XY plane. Here it's the XY plane because it intersects the X-axis and the Y-axis. So that's going to bring me in orthographically to that particular plane. Your planes are all that you start with, the XY, YZ, and ZX, are all going to be under the origin folder here. So the file that I'm using is XY, and if I hover over it, it's going to show up, and I can even turn the visibility on as well. I'm going to leave it off though, but just know that I'm creating it on that XY plane. So you can make your piece as creative as you want, but all I did was find pieces on the internet that I traced out. So once you're in the sketch, once you've started a new sketch, it's going to open up this toolbar here, and under the insert section you can find image, and it can bring in a new image. I've already downloaded a picture of a rook off the internet and made sure it's a JPEG. JPEGs seem to be pretty bulletproof, but you can also use PNG, probably work fine too, just not any obscure file types. So I'm going to open that up and anchor to the origin point, and press escape to get out of the insert command, and then I'm going to start tracing this out. So I'm going to trace out start with the base here. You can see this is an orthographic view of a rook, which is kind of handy, so the bottom is going to be flat even though it's meant to be round. You can see I have a horizontal constraint on there. That's pretty important. So if it's the line's drawn at 90 degrees, that should be no problem. I'm going to create this part with an arc, so I'm going to go up to this point here. I'm going to make sure I drop the start of the arc on the end point of that existing line. And the way the arc works in Inventor is that you start at the start point, then you identify the end point, and then you can identify the vertex of the arc. So I'm going to drop it right there, and that's pretty accurate. Next I'm going to use the arc again, so I'm going to drop it right there. That's my end point, and I'm not necessarily trying to make it exactly like this piece. It doesn't really matter. For this section here, I'm going to use the spline tool. This is a pretty organic curve. So the spline can be found under line, the drop down there, and you got two spline options. You got control vertex, which every time you click the mouse, it's going to control exactly where the curve of the spline is going to be. Interpolation, I wouldn't worry too much about that, but you can give it a whirl if you like. So I'm going to make sure again that the dot is turned green, indicating that I'm snapping to the end point of that curve. And I'm going to just start dropping points here. Right there. Once you're done, you can press the check mark. And for that, I'm going to use the arc again. And I'm going to finish up the rest of it using the line tool. Okay. So I'll press escape to get out of the line command. And then I'm going to identify where the center of this is going to be. So if I scroll across that line, eventually it's going to turn green. That's going to indicate my midpoint. And I'll draw a line straight up vertically through the top. And I'm going to trim away the excess lines. One thing that you might want to do is just constrain this line, and this line horizontally and vertically. So what we can do here is we got constrain tools. This is going to be my vertical constraint, and I'm just going to make sure that that's constrained vertically, and it's already taken place, so that's no problem. I'm going to make sure this one is constrained horizontally. Oops. And this one as well. Alright. If you want to get rid of that image that was used to create the sketch, you're going to find it in your timeline, and it's going to be under the expand. And anything that is dependent on something else, so the image was needed to create the sketch, so it's found under sketch 1. And if we use the sketch to create like a revolve, the revolve is then going to be dependent on sketch 1 and be up above sketch 1. So that's sort of how the timeline works. Anyway, in image 1, I can right click and turn off the visibility if I'd like. Now I'm going to go to finish sketch. I'm going to go to the revolve tool. And you can see that because I only have one profile available, it has highlighted blue. I'm going to identify my axis that I want it to spin around, and you can see by default it's 360 degrees. I can adjust that if I wanted to. Let's say I want it to go 3/4 of the way around, then it leaves a quarter of it out. But of course, well, unless you want to make a very creative board, you could do that with all your pieces, which would be kind of interesting. But I want to make mine 360, press OK. Alright, the next thing I want to do is, on a typical Rook, this is going to be, there is going to be a hole in the top. So for that, I'm going to draw a new sketch. And I want that new sketch to be on top of my Rook. So you can see after I go to 2D sketch, it's going to indicate at the bottom here, select plane to sketch, to create sketch, or an existing sketch to edit. So I'm going to click on this particular plane. So any surface is going to potentially be a plane. So if I click on that, that's going to be a work plane that's available to me. So now I'm going to be, my drawing, my new sketch is going to be exactly on top of that. So I'm going to create a circle by grabbing the origin point and bringing it out maybe yay big, just kind of eyeballing it. And I am going to finish my sketch. At this point then I'm going to go to extrude. I'm going to click on the circle that I've just created, and you can see it extrudes up by default. I'm going to switch the direction. That's going to change my boolean to cut, and I can adjust how much it cuts here. So I want to just, again, I'm just eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And press OK. Alright, so now I got a hole in there. Oops. Yeah. So now what I want to do is I want to create what I've heard are called battlements, which are these areas here. So to do that, I need to create a work plane that's just in front of this this top piece here. So I got different planes available. I got, again, my YZ, XZ, and XY, but those aren't necessarily going to work all that great for me. So you can always create a new plane. What I'm going to do before I get carried away is, under my revolution, I have the sketch that I used to create that revolution, and I'm going to turn the visibility of that on. Alright, so now I can see my sketch there. And if I wanted to create a work plane that goes directly tangent of this top piece, I have an option for that. So if I go to work feature, this is where I'm going to create a new plane. And I got several different options to create that new plane. So for example, I could go to midplane of torus, and if I click on this, what we would call a torus here, it's going to create a plane that slices right through the middle of it. Now that's not necessarily what I want. What I want, again, is it to be directly tangent to this top part. So I can use what we call tangent to surface through point. So for that, I need to identify my tangent, what I want it to be tangent to, my plane, and identify a point as well. So I'm going to identify the endpoint of the sketch, which is also on that tangent line. So there I have my work plane, which is directly tangent of this tower. So now when I go to start a new sketch, I'm going to click on this particular plane here, wait till it's green, and again it's going to orthographically zoom in on that particular plane. Alright, so now what I would like to do is create that profile of what I want the battlement to look like. So I'm just going to use a rectangle tool, and I'm just kind of winging this. I'm going to use the circle tool. I'm going to create a circle from the midpoint of that triangle, snap it to the end point, and then trim away some lines. So I'll trim away that line and that line there. Okay, so that's going to be the base. Oh, actually, now I'm going to move it. So go to the move command, highlight that section there, choose a base point. I'm going to click that center point, and I'll go yes, and snap it to the middle. Press done. Now I'm going to go to finish my sketch, and change my view here a little bit, orbit around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Extrude, and I'm going to click on that profile just created. I'm going to change my boolean to cut, and I'm going to extend this arrow all the way through and press OK. So now I got two here. So what I could do now is, just like in AutoCAD, we have a polar array tool. So that can be found under patterns here, along with the mirror. If you're ever looking for a mirror, that's where you're going to find it. So I'm going to click on circular pattern or polar array, and I'm going to identify the feature that I want to rotate around in the circular pattern. So rather than click here, what I could do is click on this extrusion that I've made here in my timeline. And then for my rotational axis, all I have to do is click on a circle. So I'll click on this circle here, and it's going to identify the center point of that circle as the axis. Alright, so it created that access in the center. You can see my it's projected what it's going to look like. I have 6 in the placement. I could up that to 8 potentially. Let's do that and press OK. And there I have my battlements. Alright. Last thing I want to do is create my name, emboss my name onto this rook. So I'm gonna go to the back here, and now what I'm gonna have to do is create a plane, a work plane, that is offset from the particular object that I want to emboss. So what I'll do is I'll use that same tool for creating a plane. So I'm going to use the tangent and point. So I want it to be tangent to this bottom portion, and I want it to intersect that point here. Oh, I'm not sure it did it. Let's try that again. So tangent to surface through point, and there we go. Okay, so that's my work plane I'm going to use. So I'm going to go to 2D sketch. I'm going to use this work plane. And keep in mind that if I were to draw something over here, it'd still be on this work plane. The work plane extends on forever. It doesn't necessarily is just in one particular spot. But either way, what I'm going to do is create some text. So I'll create it right here. And I'm going to use my name. And center it. I'm not sure what my height should be yet. And you can see it comes in not necessarily how I wanted it to, but that's okay. I'm going to use the rotate tool. So I'll click on the object here, select my center point, and rotate it 90 degrees. I'm done. And now I'll move it into place. So select base point, and I'll move it about there. And done. Okay, so now I'm finished that sketch. And you can see that the nightingale is sitting off that particular workpiece here. So now what I have is the emboss tool here. So an emboss creates a raised or recessed feature from a profile. And you can see the example it gives there. So I'm going to click on my profile. I want it to be my name. This is going to be a raised feature, and this will be an engrave. So let's try engrave. I'm going to reverse toward the object and press OK. And there I've engraved my name into the rook. And I would consider that pretty complete. One thing I might want to do is just tidy it up a little bit so I can turn up the visibility of my work planes. I got some that I didn't really use. I'm going to turn off that sketch, and there's my piece right here. One other thing I can do straight away actually is if I go up here to appearance, I can give my my rook a different appearance. Let's say I want it to be aluminum polished. then I can drag that up into my document, appearances here, and then drag it onto, maybe I gotta highlight it first, double click that. Press exit out of there. Uh-oh, it doesn't seem to be working very well. Oh, there we go. It just took a little bit of time. And there is my polished aluminum Rook. Okay, hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you.